Hello, welcome to day 8 of revising previous year question paper for UPSC 2027. In this paper, in this video, I will revise, not discuss, 5 questions from GS3, 5 questions from GS4 and essay, like I did earlier for GS1 and GS2. So let's get started. Question 1, GS3. Distinguish between this is the year 2025. Okay, question 1. Distinguish between the Human Development Index and Inequality Adjusted Human Development Index with special reference to India. Why is the IHDI considered a better indicator of inclusive growth? Published by UNDP, this can be a potential UPSC question. Published by UNDP, the Human Development Index measures national achievements in health, education, and income, whereas the Inequality Adjusted HDI discounts these achievements based on their internal distribution across the population. Distinction with special reference to India. Methodological difference. HDI reflects regional averages, masking internal disparities. IHDI captures the actual human development available to an average citizen by accounting for structural inequality. India's scenario. India's baseline HDI value regularly drops by nearly 25% when adjusted for inequality, highlighting significant domestic gaps across all 3 dimensions. Why IHDI is a better indicator for inclusive growth? Captures disparities. It penalizes systemic inequalities in wealth accumulation, unequal access to quality healthcare, and education gaps. Policy realism aligns directly with SDG 10, reduced inequalities, providing a realistic yardstick for targeted public welfare intervention rather than aggregated economic growth. Pivoting to IHDI assessments allow policymakers to look beyond aggregate numbers and design targeted strategies for truly inclusive, equitable growth. Question 2. What are the challenges before the Indian economy when the world is moving away from free trade and multilateralism to protectionism and bilateralism? How can these challenges be met? The global retreat from multilateralism towards protectionism and bilateral trade blocks creates distinct headwinds for India's export-driven and manufacturing growth trajectories. Challenges before the Indian economy. Export stagnation. Tariff barriers, non-tariff walls, and anti-dumping duties restrict key Indian sectors like IT, textile, and pharmaceuticals. Supply chain vulnerability. Global trade fragmentation disrupts critical raw material flow, threatening electronic and clean energy assembly. WTO paralysis. The breakdown of multilateral dispute mechanism exposes India to unilateral trade sanctions by dominant economic powers. This is the flow diagram like global protectionism, tariff walls, export compression, and supply disruption. Strategies to meet the challenges. Strategic bilateralism. Rapidly finalize comprehensive high-quality FTAs with complementary markets, example, UK, EU, that is European Union, and UAE. Domestic resilience. Leverage the PLI scheme and infrastructure projects to boost competitiveness under Atmanirbhar Bharat. Export diversification. Tap new markets in the global south, emphasizing digital public infrastructure services. By balancing export diversification with domestic manufacturing capacity, India can maintain economic resilience amid global geopolitical realignments. Question 3. Explain the factors influencing the decision of the farmers on the selection of high-value crops in India. High-value crops such as fruits, vegetables, spices, and floriculture offer paths to double farm incomes, but their adoption depends on complex ecological, financial, and technological factors. This is the flow diagram, like farmers HVC decision, agroclimatic constraints and micro irrigation, market infrastructure, financial capacity, and price security. Factors influencing HVC selection: agroclimatic conditions and water security. Cultivating HVCs requires precise microclimate parameters, access to assured micro irrigation systems. Example, drip system under PMKSY, that is a scheme, is essential for farmers switching from traditional grains. Market infrastructure and logistics. Since HVCs are highly perishable, adoption relies heavily on the local availability of temperature controlled logistics, cold chains, and nearby food processing clusters. Financial resources and input access. Transitioning to HVCs demands significant upfront capital for quality seeds and specialized setups requiring access to formal institutional credit. Price risk. The lack of price safety nets, like the minimum support price for most HVCs, exposes farmers to high market volatility affecting adoption decisions. Strengthening cold chain logistics and providing risk mitigation tools will encourage more smallholders to shift sustainability towards high value agriculture. Explain the scope and significance of supply chain management of agricultural commodities in India. Agricultural supply chain management involves the efficient movement of farm commodities from farm gates to consumer tables, minimizing post-harvest losses while maximizing value addition. Scope of agricultural SCM: pre-harvest to post-harvest logistics includes setting up integrated cold chain networks, smart grading facility, and modern dry storage units. Digital integration leverages agri-tech and unified trading platforms like eNAM to connect farmers directly with processing centers and bulk purchasers. Significance of SCM: economic benefits and social and ecological value. The benefits: it reduces post-harvest losses, curtails annual food waste worth billions via advanced storage. Price stabilization balances seasonal demand fluctuations, curbing retail food inflation. Boost farm incomes, bypasses exploitative intermediaries, ensuring high profit margins for cultivators. Food security ensures steady supply chain to urban areas, supporting SDG 2 zero hunger. Investing heavily in post harvest infrastructure through the Agricultural Infrastructure Fund AIF is vital to build resilient, profitable, and food secure supply chains. The fusion energy program in India has steadily evolved over the past few decades. Mention India's contribution to the International Fusion Energy Project, International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor. What will be the implication of the success of this project for the future of global energy? India's domestic fusion energy research, anchored by the Institute of Plasma Research, led to its entry into the International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor project in 2005 as a full collaborative partner. India's high-tech contributors to ITER. Cryostat manufacturing. India successfully fabricated the massive double-walled stainless steel vacuum vessel that houses the entire reactor core. Advanced inclusions. Developed critical cooling water system, shielding blocks, and radio frequency heating components, highlighting India's high precision engineering capacity. Implication of project success: infinite clean energy, validates commercial fusion power, offering an inexhaustible carbon-free baseload energy source using hydrogen isotopes. Zero long-lived waste. Fusion eliminates high-level radioactive waste and structural meltdown risk, transforming global energy geopolitics. Climate target fulfillment. Accelerates the global transition away from fossil fuels, helping secure long-term targets under SDG 7. The success of ITER will mark a major leap towards ultimate energy security, positioning India at the forefront of global clean energy technology. So I'm done with 5 questions now. Let's get started with GS4. And again, the pattern, the format will be same. I will I will go through 5 questions and thereafter I will go through the essay. Question 1. In the present digital age, social media has revolutionized our way of communication and interaction. However, it has raised several ethical issues and challenges. Describe the key ethical dilemmas in this regard. Social media social social media ethics evolves Social media ethics involves applying foundational moral principles to digital communications. Its revolution has introduced complex dilemmas where corporate profits, technological architecture, and human rights frequently collide. The key ethical dilemmas: freedom of expression and curbing hate speech, balancing individual speech rights against the urgent administrative duty to prevent misinformation and communal violence, data privacy versus algorithmic monetization. The friction between a user's right to data privacy, Article 21, and tech corporation using behavioral profiling to maximize engagement. Anonymity versus accountability. Anonymity protects digital whistleblowers but also shield bad actors from legal consequences regarding cyberbullying and trolling. Truth versus virality, that is post-truth. Algorithm prioritize sensationalism over factual reality, distorting public discourses for corporate gain. Resolving these challenges requires combining strict legal frameworks like the DPDP Act with algorithmic transparency, ensuring technology serves the public interest. Constitutional morality is not a natural sentiment but a product of civil education and adherence of the rule of law. Examine the significance of constitutional morality for public servant, highlighting the role in promoting good governance and ensuring accountability in public administration. As articulated by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, constitutional morality means adhering to the core values of the Constitution, such as liberty, equality, justice, over passing societal opinions or arbitrary exercises of administrative powers. The significance of public servants: promoting good governance. It moves officials from passive rule compliance to active value-driven governance. It ensures that public welfare policies remain inclusive, transparent, and non-discriminatory, targeting the most vulnerable groups. Antodhya, ensuring accountability. It acts as an internal moral compass under Article 51A. This principle guides civil servants to resist political pressures, prevent conflict of interest, and keep administrative decisions aligned with the rule of law. Example: Lal Bahadur Shastri resigning as railway minister following a train accident showcases deep constitutional responsibility. Although that was way back, now ministers do not do these kind of things. As per second ARC guidelines, embedding constitutional morality through regular civil education transforms the bureaucracy into a responsive custodians of democratic integrity. Question 2. Karl von Clausewitz once said, "War is a diplomacy by other means." Critically analyze the above statement in the present context of contemporary geopolitical conflict. Clausewitz's dictum states that war is not a random act of violence, but a rational political tool used by states to achieve strategic foreign policy goals when diplomatic negotiations fail. Critical analysis in contemporary context. The traditional view: contemporary conflicts such as Russia-Ukraine war or Middle Eastern instabilities shows states using military power to force political concessions and reshape borders when diplomacy stalls. The ethical breakdown. Modern warfare increasingly bypasses international legal framework like the UN Charter. The use of gray zone tactics, cyber warfare, and economic blockades impacts civilian populations turning war into a failure of diplomacy rather than its extension. Example, India's diplomatic stance that this era is not of war emphasizes that dialogue must replace violence. While war remains a geopolitical reality, true international stability requires moving away from clouds Clausewitzian aggression toward collective rule based global diplomacy. Keeping the national security in mind, examine the ethical dilemmas related to controversies over environmental clearance of development projects in ecologically sensitive border areas in the country. This issue creates a classic ethical dilemma pitting the state's duty to protect territorial integrity through infrastructure against its obligation to conserve fragile ecosystem for sustainable development. This is the flow diagram, the National Security Corps ecological conservation. Key ethical dilemmas. Immediate security versus long-term sustainability. Building strategic border roads is vital for defense mobilization, but clearing forest can trigger landslides and flash floods as seen in recent Himalayan infrastructure crises. The statutory compliance versus tactical urgency. Bypassing detailed environmental impact assessments for defense needs speeds up project delivery but risks causing permanent unmitigated damage to local biodiversity. State directives versus indigenous well-being. Aligning border development with national defense priorities can displace local communities and disrupt traditional livelihoods. Addressing this requires a balanced approach. Using green engineering methods and conducting independent ecological reviews to ensure infrastructure strengthens security without destroying the environment. So I already completed like 4 questions, so I will go with only this question. 3A. Those who in trouble untroubled are. Will trouble itself. Thiruvalluvar. What does this quotation convey to you in the present context? Can you see, guys, like now UPSC वो काफी ऊपर उठ चुके हैं. They are moved away from all those static questions like what are values, what is integrity and all. आप देख रहे हैं कि the questions are like much difficult and application based. So you need to go through the previous year question paper. There is no choice left now. This quote from Thirukkural highlights the value of emotional intelligence, fortitude, and resilience. It states that individuals who maintain inner calm and mental clarity during crisis can disarm and overcome the difficulties they face. Contemporary application, crisis administration. Public servants frequently face unexpected disasters, civil unrest, or public health emergencies. Maintaining composure allows for rational, objective decision making under intense pressure. Example, IAS officer Armstrong Pam leading the community construction of the People's Road in Manipur despite facing severe financial and logistical hurdles. I'm sorry if I mispronounced the second name of this IAS officer. Corporate and public resilience. In a rapidly changing world, leaders who manage anxiety can guide organizations through economic disruptions without compromising core ethical values. Thiruvalluvar's insight reminds us that true leadership is defined by inner calm, showing that stoic determination can turn obstacles into paths for growth. So I'm done with the 5 questions of ethics GS4 as well. Now these are like theory questions, not case studies. Now let's start with the essay. I already told in my earlier videos that my strategy is to go through one essay for a week and thereafter write it on the 7th day. So I will still continue with this truth knows no color. You might think that he was doing nothing. He is just reading the text like model answers and essays. Believe me, when you do it on your own, you will feel the difference in yourself. So let's get started with the essay. Truth knows no color. In the legal annals of ancient Athens, the drying ground of the Areopagus hosted trials under the bare open sky. The judges sat in absolute silence, deliberately shielded from the rhetorical theatricality, socio-economic statures, and political affiliations of the accused. The architecture of justice sought a singular, transcendental ideal to strip reality of its secondary superficial characteristics so that the bare, unvarnished truth could reveal itself. The core of this ancient practice highlights a timeless truth that genuine truth is inherently colorblind. It does not alter its structural nature based on the varying use of human prejudice, political convenience, cultural variation, or ideological alignments. To declare that truth knows no color is to recognize that objective reality stands completely independent of the subjective lenses through which humanity continuously tries to filter, manipulate, and fragment it. Yet contemporary, Yet contemporary global society exists in an era of deep fragmentation marked by structural post-truth realities, hyperpolarized echo chambers, and the weaponization of customized identities. In this environment, the pristine, colorless nature of truth is constantly threatened by political spin, cultural biases, and ideological colorings. Society increasingly encounters a fractured spectrum: my truth versus your truth, red truth versus blue truth, and nationalistic narratives clashing with universal realities. This fragmentation creates a profound human dilemma. When truth is forced to take on a color, it ceases to be truth and degrades into propaganda, prejudice, or selective perception. Therefore, it is essential to re examine the objective core of truth. We must trace how human history, philosophy, politics, economics, and science have either preserved its colorless purity or suffered deeply by trying to dye it in the temporary colors of opportunistic convenience. You need not to write the headings, but because this is practice, so headings, and you can see headings and flowchart in this essay. You will see the philosophical and ontological core, the colorless horizon of reality. To understand why truth knows no color, we must first examine its basic philosophical definition. In classical epistemology, truth is defined by the correspondence theory, which states that proposition is true if it matches an objective, independent reality. When the ancient sages declared in the Rig Veda, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti, truth is one, though the wise speak of it variedly. They were not suggesting that truth changes its nature. Rather, they were pointing out that while human interpretation can be colorful and varied, the underlying truth remains unified and uncolored. The color, the colors belong entirely to the human observer's eye, not to the object being observed. This idea is beautifully illustrated by Plato's famous allegory of the cave. The prisoners chained inside the cave perceive the shifting, colorful shadows thrown upon the wall as the absolute truth. These shadows represent the distorted colors of societal convention, unexamined opinions, and sensory illusions. It is only when a prisoner break free and climb out into the sunlight that they see the world as it actually exists, illuminated by the pure, clear light of the sun. The sun does not color the landscape, it reveals things exactly as they are. In the same way, the pursuit of truth requires a conscious effort to look past the superficial colors of immediate perception to discover the objective principles underneath. The historical dimension, the heavy cost of colored narratives. Throughout history, whenever societies have tried to color the truth to match their prejudices, the results have been disastrous. Totalitarian regimes throughout the 20th century provide clear warnings of this danger. In the Soviet Union, the state rejected traditional genetics because it did not align with communist ideology. Instead, they embraced proletarian science led by Trofim Lysenko. This politically colored version of biology ignored objective reality, resulting in terrible agricultural failures and widespread famine that cost millions of lives. The state tried to force biology to follow a specific ideological color, but nature refused to comply, showing that objective truth cannot be bent by political willpower. Similarly, the dark history of colonialism shows how powerful nations like USA, UK colored truth to justify global exploitation. European empires created a pseudo-scientific theory of scientific racism, using distorted biological narratives to claim that white Europeans were naturally superior to other races. This colored truth was used to justify the theft of resources and the subjugation of millions across Asia, Africa, and the Americas. By the time the world recognized this narrative as a self serving lie, centuries of exploitation had already occurred. History shows that whenever truth is dyed in the colors of human arrogance or greed, it leads directly to institutional oppression and human sufferings. The constitutional and judicial imperative, the blindfold of justice. In modern democratic governance, the principle that truth knows no color is built directly into the legal framework. The universal symbol of justice, a blindfolded woman holding a pair of scales, captures this idea perfectly. The blindfold is not a sign of ignorance, it represents a commitment to objectivity. It means justice must not see the race, caste, gender, economic status, or political power of those who come before the court. The law must look past these superficial colors to evaluate the core facts of the case impartially. In the Indian constitutional framework, this principle is anchored in Article 14, which guarantees equality before the law and equal protection of the laws. The Supreme Court of India has consistently protected this colorless standard of truth in landmark judgments. For example, in the state of Karnataka versus Selvi, 2010 case, the court ruled that forcing individuals to undergo narco analysis or polygraphic test violates Article 20, Clause 3, protection against self incrimination, and the right to privacy under Article 21. The judiciary emphasized that the search for truth must never use methods that violate human dignity or distort justice, reinforcing that the legal discovery of truth must remain fair, objective, and untainted by administrative overreach. Before the law, okay, this is a flow diagram, you can see it. The socio-cultural fabric beyond the lines of caste and creed. In social life, in social life, human prejudice frequently tries to dye truth in the specific colors of caste, religion, and community identity. This creates fragmented societal narratives where actions are judged not by what was done but by who did it. This tribal thinking distorts social justice, creating double standards where the exact same action is praised when done by one's own group but condemned when done by an outsider. The life and work of Gandhi stood as a powerful rejection of this tribalism. Gandhi centered his entire philosophy on satyagraha, insisting on truth. For Gandhi, truth was not a flexible tool to be altered for political convenience or community bias. He famously stated, "Truth is God," emphasizing that truth is an absolute, universal reality that transcends all human divisions. His campaign against untouchability was a direct challenge to the color prejudices of his era. He argued that the practice of caste discrimination was a deep distortion of the spiritual truth that all human beings share the same divine essence. By anchoring his social and political movements in this unyielding commitment to objective truth, Gandhi showed that true social reform requires stripping away communal prejudices to recognize our shared humanity. The economic and scientific realm, the neutrality of data and discovery. The worlds of science and economics provide clear proof that truth exists independent of human opinion. A mathematical equation or a chemical reaction does not change its behavior based on the identity of the person studying it. The laws of physics operate exactly the same way in New Delhi, New York, and Nairobi. When Galileo looked through his telescope and discovered evidence supporting the heliocentric model, his findings directly challenged the colored religious doctrines of the 17th century church. The church forced him to recant and placed him under house arrest, trying to suppress his discovery. Yet their actions could not alter the orbit of the earth. As Galileo quietly muttered, Eppur si muove, and yet it moves. The objective truth of the solar system remained completely unaffected by the political and religious preferences of the state. In modern economics, data and structural realities display a similar stubborn neutrality. Inflation, fiscal deficit, and rising unemployment figures do not alter their real world impact to suit a government's political public relation campaigns. The Economic Survey of India consistently emphasizes that sustainable development requires looking at economic facts clearly and objectively. If a nation ignores real data on rural distress or rising economic inequality, no amount of polished rhetoric can prevent the resulting structural slowdown. Market forces and economic realities eventually expose any attempt to color the data, proving that long-term prosperity can only be built on a foundation of unvarnished economic facts. The psychological and media landscape, navigating the post-truth era. In the modern digital age, preserving the colorless nature of truth has become an increasingly difficult psychological challenge. The rise of social media algorithms has created powerful echo chambers that cater directly to our cognitive biases. These platforms are designed to feed users information that confirms their existing political and social views, trapping individuals in customized realities. In this environment, truth is frequently colored by our emotional preferences. People are drawn to stories that make them feel validated regardless of whether those stories are factually accurate. This psychological vulnerability has fueled the post-truth era, where objective facts carry less weight in shaping public opinion than appeals to emotion and personal belief. Misinformation campaigns deliberately add emotional and political colors to facts to cause social division and political unrest. When public debate when public debate becomes a clash between deeply polarized, colored narrative, the shared ground needed for democratic discussion disappears. Trust in vital public institutions like the judiciary, scientific bodies, and independent media erodes rapidly, leaving society vulnerable to manipulation. Navigating this landscape requires individuals to develop strong critical thinking skills and the psychological maturity to seek out objective facts even when those facts challenge their personal beliefs. The international arena, the geopolitical use of universal ethics. In international relations, the search for truth is constantly complicated by national self interest and geopolitical rivalries. The field of geopolitics is often driven by realpolitik, where powerful nations routinely color the truth to justify their foreign policies. One nation's freedom fighter is frequently labeled by another as a terrorist, and interventions launched in the name of democratization are often transparent covers for securing valuable natural resources or expanding strategic influence. To counter this destructive cynicism, the international community has worked to establish universal frameworks based on objective truth about human dignity. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals represent collective effort to rise above national biases. These frameworks are built on the objective truth that every human being, regardless of nationality, is entitled to fundamental rights, clean water, quality education, and safety from violence. When nations gather at forums like the UN General Assembly or the IPCC climate summits, Long-term success depends entirely on their willingness to face global truth objectively, such as the reality of climate change, rather than viewed through the narrow lens of short-term national advantage. To see the truth clearly, without the distorting colors of prejudice, ideology, or personal bias, is one of the highest achievements of human character. It requires intellectual honesty and courage to accept reality even when it makes us uncomfortable or contradicts our long held assumptions. The pursuit of truth is not a passive act, it is an active, lifelong commitment to check our biases, questioning comfortable consensus, and standing up for objective facts in the face of widespread misinformation. As the world becomes more interconnected, yet politically fragmented, protecting the colorless purity of truth is vital for the survival of democratic societies. We must deliberately strengthen our public institutions, safeguard the independence of the judiciary, support free and rigorous scientific inquiry, and cultivate a public culture that values objective evidence over emotional rhetoric. The timeless insight of Rabindranath Tagore's Gitanjali remains our best guide for the future, a vision of a society where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of dead habits. By keeping the stream of human reason clear and uncolored, we ensure that truth remains the steady, reliable foundation for human progress, justice, and universal unity.